Hi, welcome to Chapter and Verse. I'm here today with P.C. Cast, a mega best-selling author, and we're going to talk about her career and her books and advice and tips for writers and readers, and just it'll be a great lively discussion. Be sure to hang around till the end because you will learn a lot, and PC is going to give you one of her top tips if you're an aspiring writer. I'm Rick Bleiweiss. I'm an award-winning author as well. I have a mystery coming out in February called 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 and the Barbershop Detectives. Scratching the ear had nothing to do with that. And that's enough about me. Hi, PC.
Hi, Rick. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for doing this. So why don't we go back to the beginning? And how did you become a writer? I know you did other things before that, and fill us in.
I did. I'm an Air Force veteran, and then I also am a retired high school teacher. I also have taught as a college adjunct too. But I wrote my first book in first grade.
Really?
Yeah, Blubby the Blue Whale. Yeah, it was about a little girl who happened to also be in first grade, who was very familiar. Who the only thing I can remember about it for sure is that the heroine, first grade me, rode a fly. The whale flew through the sky. That's all I remember. But then when I got published many, many years later, my first grade teacher was still alive. And she told my mom, she said, I knew it. I knew it from first grade that she was going to be an author. Because they used to take me out of reading time in first grade. They take me out of my first grade class and they moved me up to third grade. Because I read at a level that was way. And so when they took me out of the reading classes and sent me to third grade, I was more interested in what I could read there. But also, it's why I'm such I am the worst speller. I am so horrible because I missed the spelling section, the phonetic section. So so those of you who can't spell, that won't stop you. Okay, just learn to love the red squiggly line. And I always have a huge dictionary and thesaurus that sit next to me. So
yeah, I do as well. I get that. So did you know in the first grade that you wanted to be a writer, or did you did?
Yes, I knew. I can never remember a time when I couldn't read or write. I have very vivid memories from the age 4 on. And I was reading Johnny Go Round was my favorite book.
Wow.
He was a tan tomcat. And would you like to know why we call him that? I still remember the words.
Sure.
That's how the book starts. But no, I always knew that I was going to be, and I thought I was going to be a best-selling author. I knew that, and I also knew I was always going to be a teacher. I just also am a veteran and did several other things while I was in that. But I kept writing the whole time. Like I wrote my first book in first grade. I tried to write another book in 8th grade called Nurse Janice.
Okay.
And I was specifically wanting to write this for 𝐻𝐪lequin. And I started writing it and had to stop because I couldn't figure out how to move characters from one scene to another.
I'm glad that you nailed that in later on.
I figured that out. Yeah. But then I did figure that out. And in my late 20s, because Kristen was born, my daughter was born when I was 26, late 26. And about that time, I started seriously writing a book. And the book I was writing then was called When Darkness Rises.
Ooh.
It was full of the biggest cliches. So bad. It was so incredibly bad. And my grandmother, who I was very, very, very close to, who I miss every day, my second cousin is Ann Tyler.
Okay.
And the Pulitzer Prize winning author.
Yes, yes.
And my grandma, and I'm named after Ann Tyler's mom.
Oh, cool.
Yes, and my grandma and Ann Tyler's mom, Phyllis, were very close. And so my grandma was very close to Ann too. So I send my grandma this absolutely horrible manuscript. It was Rick, it was so bad. She sent it to Ann.
Oh.
Ann and I have, we've corresponded, we were friends and we're friends and everything, but I just still am just like, I've never mentioned it, that I know she read it. She's been very gracious to not tell me, oh girl, give up. Okay, way back then, just don't write, because it was so bad. But yeah, I've always known I was going to be an author.
So did you write while you were in the Air Force and teaching, or did you start writing again after you left those two positions?
No, I didn't do a lot of writing when I was in the Air Force. I joined the Air Force. I enlisted February 1978. It was right before I graduated. I graduated high school May 30th, 1978. Then I went active duty 5 days later. Oh, and I was busy being 18 and an early 20 something. It was only it was my late 20s when I came back around to it. I never stopped reading. I've always been a gigantic reader, of course, right. But I didn't actively write during that time. It was a little bit, I had to grow up a little bit. So I grew up first. Yeah, I did that. And I did, after I left the Air Force, I put myself through college as a single mother. When I started going to college when Kristen was 2, and she actually went to college with me. This was so long ago that she used to be allowed to go to some of my college classes with me.
Oh, wow.
And she, yeah, 2 years old, she had a little pink like pretend little girl briefcase, and she'd fill with crayons and sheets of paper, and she'd sit next to me and open her briefcase, because mommy had a briefcase too, right? Open her briefcase, and she'd pretend to take notes like I was in the college classes. Even though I had no time, somehow I started writing again in college, and I went back to college when I was 29. So I was writing in college. I was like editor of college lit mag. And when I got out of college and started teaching, I also started seriously. That's when I honed in on When Darkness Rises and sent that to my grandma. I think I also sent it to Random House. I think Random House was my first rejection, and it was soundly rejected too.
And did you send that on your own without an agent or anything?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about the business. I didn't know anything at all. So yeah, I sent it, and yeah, it was real bad. It should never have been published. I did cannibalize it for themes and a couple characters in it for my first book that I actually did get published, Divine by Mistake.
Okay.
And so I cannibalized it a little bit. So one early writing tip is, guys, don't ever throw anything away. Scrap a manuscript if it's not working for you. Even if you love it and think it's fantastic and you've sent it to like 10, 20, 30, 40 agents, and everyone is like, no. Ask them why no, and see if you can get a response, because that's always very helpful. And then consider, let me put this manuscript figuratively or literally under my bed and move on. Just move on. One of my best friends, as you know, Rick, is Gina Showalter, and I are very close friends. And when she got published, she actually had like 6 manuscripts that she'd already completed. And of course, they've all now been published. So
yes, everything.
Wow,
that's cool. So the first book that you had published, what was that, and what led up to it being published? In other words, what was the process you went through to get it to a publisher?
Well, I was teaching high school, Broken Arrow, South Intermediate High School. Go Tigers. And
that's in Tulsa, right? No?
Broken Arrow is a close suburb of Tulsa.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I was teaching and writing, and I was writing the book that eventually got published, and I knew that I needed like an editor. I needed like, now I know what it is I needed. I needed an editor. I neneeded a contract. I needed a deadline. So what I did was I had heard that there was a professor at OSU Tulsa named Teresa Miller, who was also the executive director of Oklahoma Poets and Writers Association.
Okay.
And I knew that she was teaching this creative writing class once a year. And it was a nighttime class at OSU Tulsa. And I knew that it was, lots of writers were talking about it. Lots of local authors were talking about it. So I enrolled in her class, and I told her I was going, this is 1998, I think, 1998. Yeah. I told her that I was going to pretend like she was my editor. Okay. And so I asked her if, instead of working on, because she gave us like writing challenges every week, right? I said, could I take those challenges and move them to my manuscript? So instead of turning in these different writing challenges every week, could I turn in pieces of my manuscript that reflect what you've assigned? Okay. And she said, absolutely. So I pretended like she was my editor. Okay, and good. I had a deadline every week. I made a deadline. I had to get a certain amount of writing done. And when I left that class at the end of semester, I had Divine by Mistake. It was originally titled Goddess by Mistake. And it was about 3/4 the way done. And then she and I have since we're best friends. And she and I were at a book signing together after class. And she introduced me to a local publisher, a small press publisher, whose favorite author is Ann Tyler. Okay, well, that's cool. Yeah. She said, this is your favorite author's cousin, because Ann Tyler is my cousin, right? And she said, she's also has a manuscript. And he said, why isn't it on my desk? And I said, well, it's not done. And he said, I'm going on vacation. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Can it be done then? And I said, yes. Inside my head, I was like, I don't know. And I made sure it was done. And that's how my first book got published. That's also how I got an agent. Okay. That first book. And I wish so much I had done this backwards. I wish I had taken that first book and shopped it, because as you know very well, Rick, if you want to be a career author, and that was my goal, to be a career author, you need an agent. Right. If you want to be a hobbyist and self-publish, or just attempt to get published as a hobby, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, you don't need an agent for that. But I wanted to be a career author. So this book got published, and shocking me very badly, it was a good shock, but it won several national awards and got a lot of attention. Yeah. And then Sharon Sayla, the author Sharon Sayla, she's also from Oklahoma. She was being interviewed by Teresa Miller, who, besides being executive director of Oklahoma's Writers and Poets Association, used to have a regional talk show called Writing Out Loud. Okay. And between takes, she mentioned that she had this really good friend who is a young author who, well, wasn't that young, but she only has one book published. This was after I had gotten the first book published by a small press, and I had the second one done, and 50 pages of the third one started. Oh, and cool. She said, yeah, right. She said, oh, I took Teresa's class again. That's how I finished the second book. Oh, okay. I audited two of her classes. She said she kept failing me, so I'd come back. But really, I just audited the class. But she said, I think my friend needs an agent. And so she said, oh, well, I have the best agent in the world. And she wrote down Meredith Bernstein and wrote down a phone number and gave it to Teresa, and Teresa gave it to me. And that's how I got my first agent. That's how that whole thing happened. So. And obviously Meredith was very open to what you were doing and liked your writing. Meredith was hilarious. When I called her, and I remember that I'd come home from school and gone back into my spare bedroom, and I'd written like a paragraph, and I paced back and forth in that small bedroom. I was so nervous. My hands were all sweaty, and I was going to throw up. And I was like, okay. And I kept reading, hi, hello, may I speak with Meredith Bernstein, please? And then I thought what I would be doing was telling a secretary or leaving a message or something. Right. And so I had this whole paragraph ready, and the phone rang like 2 times. And she said, Meredith Bernstein. I was like, I went,
what do I do now?
my name is, and then I read the whole thing, blah, 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 and I stopped. And when I was done, she went, stop, go back, slow down, say it all again. So I did. And she asked me if I could overnight her the first book, the manuscript to the second book, and my first 50 pages. And I did. And that was like it was midweek of one week. By the end of the next week, she didn't sell those books because they ended up being, the first book was tied up with a small pub. It took quite a while to get the rights back to that book, but she orchestrated it. Seriously, only took like 5 days for me to get my first contract, and it was with Berkeley for the first 3 Goddess Summoning books.
Wow, that's great. That's fabulous. So not talking about Meredith in particular, yes, but you said that if you want to be a serious writer, you really need to have a career writer, you need to have an agent. So absolutely, what would you say are the main things that an agent does that would lead you to say that? Oh,
they manage they don't just sell your manuscripts. They completely, yeah, this here.
Hello.
This is 10 months old. Yeah, that's 10 months old.
Oh, wow.
100 pounds and 10 months old. Okay, go lay down. Go play with something, not me. Play with something that's not your mother. Yeah.
Great.
Agents manage your whole career. They make sure, like Meredith would have never let me sell that book, that manuscript, to a small press, because she would have known what it could do.
Right.
She also, agents know editors, and then they know their authors, so they know who would be a good fit. Because I learned very early that, and I think Meredith might have said this to me, that your relationship with your agent, an author's relationship with an agent, is really as intimate as a marriage.
Yep.
And it really is. And so you have to be compatible on many levels. Yep. And just do your research to know that. But also, they guide your career. They get you to the right publisher. And then when there's problems, your agent is the front line. I mean, because you work for Blackstone, and I am well published by Blackstone. Love yep. me some Blackstone. Hi, Josh. But that in the process of publishing, there can be conflicts.
Yes.
About covers, about marketing, about, the minutia that authors really, we should not be arguing with our editor and our publisher. That's what agents do. Agents step in and say, whoa, 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 whoa. This cover is not going to work. She's a perfectly delightful author, and she would never say a bad word or anything to you. But I'm telling you, this cover is not going to work.
Right.
So they allow, agents have many, many jobs, but guiding careers, getting you to the right publisher and editor, and also then backing you and supporting you are like the 3 huge things. And if you're an author, a serious author, a career author, you should be focusing on the manuscripts. You should be focusing on writing and researching and putting more tools in your toolbox, not bickering over money or release dates or covers.
Right, that's your agent.
That's your agent, yes.
So I know you said you had that very first one, manuscript you wrote, rejected. Is that the only one you've ever had rejected?
No, but it was the only one I had ever had rejected for a long time. Oh. I fell into, so I got the contract with Berkeley very quickly for the Goddess Summoning books. And pretty quickly, within just a couple of years, I was teaching full time, being a single parent, and I was writing for Berkeley and Harlequin.
Okay.
And I had upwards of 10 books published. And then my agent, Meredith, and I were at or my first agent, Meredith, she and I were at a Romance Writers of America convention, and we were having dinner, and there was a lot of wine involved. And Meredith, that's very true.
Meredith.
And so in the middle of the dinner, she said to me, I want you to write a series set at Vampire Finishing School. And since I was teaching high school and I was seeing, this was in 2005, and I was seeing the YA genre just explode, I went, oh my God, yeah, YA. And she said, what's YA? And I said, young adult. And she said, no, I'm talking college co-eds, a biting class, a sucking class, a bondage class. And I said, well, yeah, I said, yeah, I can do that, sure. But right now the YA genre is, I feel like it's really starting to take off. I'm surrounded by teenagers. I'm reading a lot of YA. I would really like to try writing it. So she said, write 3 chapters. I said, okay. So from those 3 chapters, Berkeley and Macmillan, St. Martin's both wanted it. And this was, and they had a bidding war, and the bidding war was, we're not talking very much money. Okay. Oh, I'll just tell you guys what the, easily. Berkeley bid $14,000 per book.
Right.
And remember, I was a very strong mid-list author. I had at least 10 books out then.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were there. It was fine. I was doing well. I was on like 2nd or 3rd contracts and, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
So they bid $14,000 and St. Martin's Griffin bid 15.
Whoa.
Now that, as you know, $1,000 is not going to sway me, but my agent did. And that's what, and now I'm very glad she did. I mean, I love Berkeley, but Macmillan, St. Martin's was the right place for House of Night. Yep. And she knew that. And so she was like, I really have a gut feeling that you need to go with St. Martin's. And it changed my life.
So talking about changing your life, if I'm not mistaken, you had told me at one point that one of the House of Night books, maybe the 3rd one, was the thing that really changed your life. Tell that story.
That it was Chosen. Chosen was my 18th book published. And it's the 3rd House of Night book. Mark betrayed Chosen. And Kristen, now I do all the writing, and my daughter Kristen was my teen voice, was my editor and is my editor for the House of Night books. Right. You know, as you guys very well know, she always weighs in on the House of Night books, but I do all the writing. So she and I knew, so Mark did well and went back to press very quickly. Good. Which I knew it was good. And I was like, you know, I wasn't a novice. I'd been writing for quite a while. I was like, okay, this is great. And then Chosen came out and it did better. And then, Betrayed came out and did better than Chosen came out. Okay, and it hadn't even been out a week. It had been out like 2 days. And my editor called me and was like, we have to go back to press. And I remember what the print run was for it too. The print run was 24,000 books.
Well, that's not bad.
It's not bad, but yeah, for House of Night ended up at the height of House of Night, I had 1 million hardback laydowns, print runs.
But you didn't at that point, and that was a nice building block.
That was a $15,000 book, yes. So she called me like literally 2 days after release, and she's like, we're going back to print. I was like, wow, that's really good. She's like, it really is. We were both like, oh. And then a couple days later, she'd call me back and she'd say, you're really looking good on BookScan. And we know BookScan is literally each scan book that sells, right? And I was like, oh, that's really good. And I don't know if the general public knows this, but let's tell them, okay, that Wednesdays before the Sunday that the new New York Times list comes out,
right?
Editors and publishers, New York Times, they correspond with them and they give them the early list so they know which authors have made the list, right? So it was like Tuesday and I didn't know about the Wednesday super secret you get to know lists thing. And I know that Wednesday, my editor called me again. I got like 5 calls, like one every day leading up to it. And she was like, we're going back to press again. I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. I said, is there any way I can hit the Times list? She said, I don't know. And I was like, okay, me either. We're like, oh my God. And then they published the top 10, but you know that we used to have the extended list.
Yes.
Even for YA, we used to have the top 10 are published, top 25, you used to be able to say that you're a New York Times bestseller. That's not the way it is anymore, but it's only top 10. But so I was like, maybe we can make the top 25. And she's like, I don't know. And I said, I don't know. Okay. She said, I'll call you tomorrow and I'll let you know. And I said, okay. So Kristen and my daughter and I took our 2 Scotty dogs, and we were walking on this trail that we always take them on after school. And it was like Oklahoma time, New York time. What do they know by they know by 4 or 5 o'clock, the list comes out. So Oklahoma time, that's a couple hours. So it was right after school. We're walking the Scotty dogs, and I'll never forget it. Chris and I are walking the Scotty dogs, phone rings, and I see it was my editor, and Chris and I both looked at each other. I was like, okay. And I was telling myself, just be prepared for, hey, you're doing great, but you didn't make the list, but you're doing great. I'm like, okay. So I answered the phone, and she screams at me, you're number 2 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And I burst into tears.
Wow.
Kristen is going, what? Did we make it? And I went, and she said, what number? And I went, she said, 20, 22, 20. And I went, oh, she said, number 2.
That's great.
Yeah. And our dogs, the Sky dogs, are like, jumping all over. I'm crying and she's crying, and we're like hanging on each other crying, and everyone's like, oh, they're so crazy, what's going on? And then I called my dad. No, wait, I called Meredith first. I called my agent first, because the editors call you, they don't call your agent first.
Oh, okay.
So I called, yeah, no, they call you first, and then I called my agent and let Meredith scream her brains out. And then I called my dad, who also screamed his brains out. And then we had a celebratory dinner.
Now you also, had a number of books that debuted as the top release.
Yeah, as you and I know, the Times list and is genre driven, right? I made that 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐠𝐞𝐿 debuted number 2 on the young adult hardback list.
Right.
But USA Today publishes the list, the top, what is it? They publish the top.
I think it's 100, isn't it?
I think that on their little, I have 4 of them framed downstairs. Okay, so I could run down and look. But I think that they only publish the top 50, and then there's an extended for the other 50.
I think so. Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know. But so that is literally each book that's sold. It's everyone jumped in together. Like if I'm on there, Dan Brown's on there, Nora Roberts is on there, James Patterson's on there. You know, that kind of. So yeah, so that is, if you hit that list, that's among everyone, not just your genre peers. And yeah, Kristen and I were on a tour, and we were in an airplane, and as we landed, I think they know that list on Thursdays. Okay. As we landed, there's a call from our publicist, and she's screaming at me, you have the #1 book in the nation. And I had it, however it was, on the plane, it had just landed, we were taxiing, and people around me heard her, and Kristen's there too. And we are, of course, freaking out.
Yeah, right.
People around me heard, and they were like, what's going on? And I was like, I have the #1 release in the nation. And the whole section of the plane started clapping and cheering.
Oh, that's great.
It was so cool. Yeah.
Oh, it was.
Yeah, that happened 4 or 5 times with the House of Night, I think.
Well, that's great.
As I said, they're framed downstairs in my office.
Yes, and I would too, believe me. I get it. So interestingly, you brought up, you wrote for Harlequin, you wrote for Berkeley, you wrote for St. Martin, you've written fantasy, romance. Do you prefer writing in one genre than the other? Do you find any issue with keeping one separate from the other, or just everything's, what it is.
Well, Rick, I don't ever think about genres when I write.
Okay.
I think about the story and then create the characters. And if they're young characters, that fits into the YA genre. And it just depends.
Right.
I don't like genre labels. I think I understand why they're there, but I've always thought, especially since I've taught, that they keep people from reading some of them, because like now a lot of adults read YA, we know that, but
Right.
that hasn't always been the case. That was only
Right.
after 2005 and Twilight and House of Night. Hello.
There you go.
And those, and also like Mockingjay and all those, but I don't ever think about genres. I just think about mostly the characters. I love writing. What I like writing about YA is that characters get to learn and grow. I get away with them doing all sorts of stuff. If a 35-year-old did it, my audience would be like,
what?
No, start over. That's bad. What she's how old? 35 or 15, so that's really the only difference. And I treat it like I treated my classroom. I respect and really, really like teenagers, and they're smart, they're funny, they're loyal. I loved teaching them and I love writing for them. And I found out in 15 years in my classroom that the worst thing you can do, well, not the worst thing, but a really bad thing you can do in your classroom is to
Right.
talk down to them.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So I also don't write down to them.
Mhm.
And so really, literally the only difference is the age of the characters. I prefer writing in the paranormal side of the genre because I like reading it. I always write the book I most want to read.
Okay.
So
That makes sense. I get
yeah,
that.
so that's how I have a adult solo apocalypse duology that starts releasing next year. And that book I wrote during the height of the Rona apocalypse. And then here in Portland, in Oregon, as you very well know, Rick, last summer and fall, we had such a horrible, horrible time with the wildfires. You guys were just devastated in Ashland.
Ashland.
I've been there how many times?
I know.
Ashland. And then we were smoked, all of us were smoked in and wildfired in for weeks. And I was in a really bad fire when I was a little girl.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I have scars, quite a few scars from it. And that's why my memory is so vivid from the age of 4 on, because I was in the fire when I was 4.
Wow.
And so I have a real problem with the wildfire smoke and stuff. And so I decided to escape and create my own apocalypse. That was better than the apocalypse I was living through. And I do that a lot in my books. I decide, like my very first book, Divine by Mistake. I love fantasy, but especially, I'm 61. So I grew up reading fantasy written mostly by men.
Right. Yeah.
Or like it felt like for 13-year-old boys, devoid of sex and a lot of humor. Like Piers Anthony, I remember when I started reading his books,
right.
I was like, oh, look, there's finally humor. And so I decided that I was going to write a fantasy starring a Oklahoma school teacher in her mid to late 30s, and take her on an adventure that was more that I could really empathize with. And that's what I do a lot. That I write books. Okay, so I can't find this book, so I'm going to just write it.
And what is your process for writing them? Do you outline them? Do you see them in your head and write stream of consciousness? How do you create your books?
I do a lot of research. I love research. I just came back from the Painted Hills. Have you ever been there?
No, I haven't been there, but I've seen pictures, photos. It's
East Central Oregon, just stunning. That's where my feminist apocalypse is going to end up, in the Painted Hills. It's just so cool. But I like to research. I love research. And whenever I research, I get lots of ideas. I also have consistently until the Rona traveled a whole lot too, to get a lot of research ideas.
Right.
So I start by researching, and then I come up with characters. And then if I'm writing by myself, I usually very loosely brainstorm, and it's like I write a letter to myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I usually have like a big beginning scene. I have a couple scenes in the middle, and I know what I want to happen at the end. And I write all that stuff down to myself. And then I just start writing, and my characters do a whole lot of stuff. I see everything in my head. Now, when I write when Kristen and I actually co-author, instead of her being my editor, like for our new trilogy, Sisters of Salem, Spells Trouble has been released already. And that's the first book. She and I that's the third book she and I have actually co-authored together. And we have our system down now. It's much different than my solo system. She and I brainstorm. Then as we start creating the characters, the characters I see really well, those are my characters. And the characters she sees are her characters. And that's like the easiest part. And then we go through and we outline the entire book.
Okay.
And I hate this. Okay. I hate this part so much. Kristen's so good at it, and I hate it so much. Then we go back and we have to outline chapter by chapter.
Oh, really?
Ugh. And we say in the chapters, we start like I'll use Spells Trouble, for example. The two heroines they're twin witches. They're just turning 16. One's Mercy, one's Hunter. Mercy is my character. So when Mercy is at the forefront of a chapter, I write that chapter. And when Hunter's at the forefront, Kristen writes that chapter. And we divide all the characters like that. And that's how we divide the chapters. So then Kristen has these big Google documents that she makes that says like, day 1, morning, chapter 1, Mercy. Then we have bullet points that I have to write about. Okay. And then she puts chapter 2 and then Hunter and then bullet points. So we have entire, we're working on 𝐬𝐻𝐿 right now, which is the third book in that trilogy. And we just finished, we're like about halfway through it. I think it's going to have 31 chapters. And we already know all the chapters and we know what's happening. Now we're just writing through it.
So she sounds like she's really organized.
Kristen is the extremely organized person of the duo here. Yes. And she takes really, really good notes, and she has a trapper keeper and everything.
Oh, wow. So tell me, what is the next book you have publishing?
The next book I have releasing in April is the second book in our YA trilogy. It's called 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞.
Oh,
and then
the title,
right? Our Monique Patterson, our awesome editor at Macmillan, right. She titled the whole thing. She titled the series. Oh. Sisters of Salem. She titled that. She titled Spells Trouble, 𝐬𝐻𝐿, and 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞. She came up with all those.
Cool.
Yeah, she's really good. Yeah. And then in July is Into the Mist. That's the first of my apocalypse duology. Okay. And is there anything you can say about that book? Oh God, I love this book so much. Yeah, it's an apocalypse where a bunch of Oklahoma teachers are going to save humanity. Oh, okay. And there's a lot of wine involved. Is that becoming like a theme here? A lot of wine involved. There's also cannabis use involved too. Okay. Hey, we live in Oregon. What the heck? Right? They're teachers. Okay. I love this duology so much. Of course, the apocalypse happens at the very beginning of it. It's set here in Oregon, but they're Oklahoma teachers because, like me, I'm a transplant to Oregon, and they came to Timberline, actually on Mount Hood, for a teachers conference, and then apocalypse happens, and the whole earth changes, and kind of like the old gods come back. Okay. It's very pagan-y, it's very goddessy, it's very feminist, and but it's also, it's going to sound wrong, okay, but it's also real funny. Okay. Okay, no, I get it. Yeah, I wrote I loved Justin Cronin's The Passage, and I like apocalypse books. I of course read Stephen King's all his apocalypse stuff.
Right.
I love Dean Koontz. I read that stuff all the time. But Dean Koontz does this. Dean Koontz does female leads very well. He writes heroines wonderfully, but it's really difficult to find a cool apocalypse book that's woman centric.
Okay.
That's female driven.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm just going to write apocalypse with a bunch of Oklahoma school teachers taking charge and getting some special powers, and I'm going to do a bunch of goddess stuff in it too. And then there'll be a bunch of scary stuff too. So that's what I did. And add wine and reefer, you know?
There you go. Very contemporary.
And a cool dog. So
Yeah, well, there you go. It sounds wonderful. I'm sure.
Yeah, I love
really
it.
Well.
I love it. Into the Mist and Out of the Dawn. I can't wait to see the cover. They're working on the cover right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So we don't have a lot of time left. So let me just ask you a couple of final things. Are there any specific tips you think other writers should know about marketing the books? Because I'm online a lot, and a lot of authors kind of complain that whether they're with a publisher or self-published, they still have to market. And what I say to them is, in today's environment, with how important social media is, you have to, or the other author is going to beat you at your own game. So what is your feeling about the best way for authors to help doing their marketing?
Well, it depends on what genre you're looking at. The younger genres, TikTok is huge right now. And I'm sorry, authors, but you're going to have to get on it and going to have to learn to be successful at it. At least be able to navigate it and know how to use it in your favor. Twitter isn't really a platform for books. I mean, it's a platform for complaining about Republicans. And I'm there for it, but you know, Facebook is as a little older, you know, it's skewing older. So, and it's important. And Instagram is fantastic too. What Kristen and I have done is we've divided things out. Kristen is very strong on Insta, and I'm very strong on Facebook. And we both keep an eye on TikTok, because House Night has such a huge cosplay fan following on TikTok, which and we love our girls. We know we're close to a whole bunch of them. So, but no, it's just important. For me, it's not the most fun part of the job, even though I really like interacting with readers. But as you know, it takes time. And if I'm going to sit down for 2 hours and do something, I would rather, if I had my choice, I would rather be writing for those 2 hours.
Got it.
But in order for my writing to be seen, I need to social media handle, you know. So
and forgetting the virus for a minute, the COVID, I know that you've been very active in going to book signings and conventions and things like that. I think that's one of your hallmarks of really putting yourself out there.
You know how much we love that, okay? We've done that for Blackstone so much. We have so much fun. Like, oh my gosh, yeah. I love touring. I love book conventions. I love Comic-Con. I love all of it, and I've missed it a whole lot. But it's important for you to be visible. To have a successful book tour, you really need your publisher behind you.
Yes.
You know, Blackstone has been, you know, a wonderful partner for us about that. We've had several very successful tours with Blackstone. But yeah, you need that input from your publisher.
Okay, cool. So before we end, what would you say is a really key major tip you would like to give other aspiring authors to kind of close this off?
Well, I think it's very important for aspiring authors, to understand that they need to take those rose-colored glasses and throw them the hell away. This is a job. if you want it to be your career, okay, no, if you want to be a hobbyist, do whatever you want. Self-publish, play around with it, you know, just be, let the muse whisper to you and then write. If you want to be a hobbyist.
Right.
If you want to be a career author, you must do what any career does. You have to educate yourself about the career. You need to know that when you and I are talking about something that's not published yet, that I've like submitted to you, that's not a book, that's a manuscript.
Right.
And you need to know the steps. You need to know what happens when you finish a manuscript. And before that you take that manuscript anywhere, you need to educate yourself to know how many words is a standalone book.
Right.
How many words right now, because you know it changes. You know, publishers like longer sometimes and shorter sometimes.
Yep.
So educate yourself about the job. Know how a manuscript changes from in your computer to on the shelves of Barnes and Noble. Know what your agent should do, know what your editor should do, know what you can expect from your publisher. Understand all of that. And then know that before you start saying, do I need an agent? How do I find an editor? You have to have a completed manuscript. And you need to write it and rewrite it and rewrite it again and then rewrite it again. As Anne Lamott says in Bird by Bird, and there's a whole chapter that she calls Shitty First Drafts.
Great chapter.
Yeah. Sit down, write it. Stop getting stuck in the minutia. Like, oh, I hear from people, how do you title your books? I'm just stuck because I can't title my book. Dude, just write Paranormal Book Number 1. Okay, because your publisher's gonna change the title probably anyway. Okay.
Right.
And how do you name your characters? Sometimes I don't. Sometimes 3/4 the way through a book, she's still green-eyed girl.
Okay.
Come to a name. Stop. Don't get stuck in the minutia. People are like, oh, I have writer's block. No, dude, you don't. It's just a really hard job.
Yeah.
You have to like work. You know, people are so many young authors contact me are like, I can always get halfway through a book and then I can't finish it. And I said, well, you're either going to finish it, learn how to finish it, or writing isn't the job for you. It's like, I really thought I was going to be a veterinarian. I was even accepted into the University of Illinois pre-veterinary program in 1978. But before I left high school, I volunteered at a vet clinic.
Wow.
And I realized I don't like poop or parasites. And I really don't like dead things. This is not the job for me. So, I told a girl the other day, I did a post on Facebook saying, I'm happy to discuss early stages of publishing. Ask me anything. And one young woman said that she had already paid an editor to edit her book, which I'm not really sure what that means.
Right.
But, and she had it bound and everything and took pictures of it and posted those pictures. And she said, but no one's interested in publishing it. And what do I do? And I said, put it aside and start a different manuscript.
Right.
And she said, she got really offended. She's like, wait, what? But I paid to have this edited. I said, that doesn't make any difference. I have more than 20 million books in print. And I have 2 manuscripts that I have right now that I have been unable to sell.
Really?
It just happens. And I can promise you that as you very well know, because you've read quite a bit of my work,
yes.
It's not that I can't write a book. Okay.
No, you can write a book. That's for sure.
Definitely write a book. And I love both these manuscripts, but it just might not be the right time. And I've actually taken my own advice besides just moving on is one of the manuscripts. And I think you read did you read my early draft of Boudica?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I completely changed that. I decided since I was getting not the positive response I wanted from editors, and this is after 20 million books in print, I pulled it back and I had about 100 pages written.
Okay.
I took it back and I read over it and I really gave it some thought, and I ended up completely changing it. It was YA. It's not YA anymore.
Yeah.
Boudica is the adult queen she was. I totally flipped the whole thing around, and I haven't sent it out or anything yet, but I had to completely rework it.
Wow. Well, on that note, since we're running out of time.
Yes, I have to take my Scotty dog to his agility class.
Right on. Well, I want to thank you so much. This has been absolutely enjoyable. And thank you for imparting what you've imparted and telling everybody about you. And I've found it fascinating. I'm sure everybody else will too.
Thank you, Rick. It was just like you and I were sitting in my living room talking.
That's kind of how I was hoping it would unfurl, and it did. Thank you, PC.
Let's do it again soon, and actually come up and sit in my living room and let's share a glass of wine.
Well, we are going to come up to Portland sometime soon, and next time we come, I will definitely do that.
With your wife, I would love to. Let's have dinner while you're here, safely. We're all vaccinated, and we'll be outside. It will be safe. Yes.
No, we're still being very careful.
We'll be very careful. Yes.
Yes. Well,
thank you, Rick. It's been a joy.
Thank you. Same for me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Talk soon.